Well, in New York City, Ivanka Trump spent much of the day testifying not as a defendant, but as the state's final witness at her family's civil fraud trial. The judge has already ruled that the Trump organization committed fraud for years. This trial will determine how much the former president and his sons will pay for that fraud and whether they can continue to do business in New York. CBS's Scott McFarland is at the courthouse.
How you doing, Ivanka?
Ivanka Trump strode confidently into the courtroom this morning in New York, but once on the stand, Ivanka, a former executive vice president in the Trump organization, had trouble recounting many key details. Answering "I don't recall" dozens of times, Ivanka explained she had no knowledge of her father's financial statements, as she did in a deposition last summer.
I've never prepared one. I don't know. I've never made one. I'm not an accountant.
The Attorney General's office says she was an active liaison with lenders during a time when the Trump organization landed sweetheart loans by lying about the former president's wealth. Emails revealed in court showed her involvement on the financing for the Doral Golf Club in Florida in 2011.
All right, people. Jack here. Something big just broke. Ivanka Trump arrest and Melania audio story had no verified documents, statements, or credible reporting. Just an echo chamber of unsubstantiated claims. The real story isn't the fake scandal itself, but how it spreads and what it reveals about the state of political misinformation in 2026. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of what these viral videos are actually claiming. And trust me, the details are specific enough to make your head spin. We're talking about multiple YouTube channels all pushing variations of the same explosive narrative. Videos with titles like Melania's hidden audio released to court as Ivanka's arrest warrant gets approved, or all hell breaks loose as marshals move in on Ivanka.
She was copied on a submission to Deutsche Bank of her father's statement of financial conditions, which portrayed his net worth as $3 billion higher than it actually was. That resulted in a deal with much better loan rates than had been previously offered. She then wrote to her fellow executives, "It doesn't get better than this." Ivanka said she didn't remember sending the email, but state lawyer Louis Solomon said it was clear she was negotiating the deal from top to bottom. The case has also focused attention on Ivanka's negotiation of the 2011 lease of the old post office building in Washington, which Donald Trump turned into the Trump Hotel, and then sold in 2022 for $139 million. Ivanka and brothers Eric and Don Jr. each reaped $4 million. New York Attorney General Letitia James said Ivanka will not be able to hide from the truth.
At the end of the day, this case is about fraudulent statements of financial condition that she benefited from. She was enriched. And clearly you cannot distance yourself from that fact.
Are racking up views by the hundreds of thousands. Some of them have even crossed into the millions. They're being shared like wildfire across every major social media platform. People are commenting furiously, tagging their friends, posting screenshots, and treating these videos as if they're legitimate breaking news from established journalistic sources. And the videos themselves? They look convincing. They've got that polished production quality that makes you think, okay, maybe this is real. Maybe someone actually has inside information. Maybe the mainstream media just hasn't caught up yet because they're too busy covering other things.
I want to begin with a recording that you made in which you and Melania Trump are talking about her legacy. And it's really fascinating to hear her kind of just speak in this way. Let's listen.
Sure. That's fine. Who supports Melania? You do have a legacy.
Yeah, but then, well, it doesn't come directly from, what I put on Twitter came from me. They know about the children, and they talked about it.
But I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying, right? I mean, you do know what I'm saying. You shouldn't have people across the world. It's in New York. It was always Melania. Like,
I don't give a.
It's not about giving a.
It's true. It's honestly, it's like, because it's honestly, I'm doing the same stuff that I did before. They cannot stand him. They know that I'm with him. They know that I'm.
But they felt badly for you before. Now that you know what I'm saying.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Okay.
But that's precisely how misinformation works. It mimics the appearance of credibility while delivering complete fiction. The core narrative being pushed is that Ivanka Trump failed to appear before a federal grand jury after being subpoenaed. According to these videos, she ignored a court-ordered deadline, and as a result, a federal judge approved what they call a bench warrant for her arrest. They're talking about U.S. Marshals now being authorized to take her into custody. They're describing dramatic scenarios of law enforcement showing up at her door.
All that all that stuff came out. They feel bad for me. My polls went up. They said, "Oh my God, she's amazing. She's fantastic."
So, Stephanie, I want to play another conversation you had with the First Lady. This one is about her trip to the border when the Trump administration was separating kids from their parents and detaining them. Let's listen.
All these kids that I met, they are here in the shelters because they were brought by it through coyotes, the people, or trafficking. And that's why they put them in jail. And the kids that they go in shelters, and the way they take care of them, it's, they even said, the kids, they say, wow, I will have my own bed. I will sleep on the bed. I will have a cabinet for my clothes. It's so sad to hear it, but they didn't have that in their own countries. Right. They sleep on the floor. They are, they are fed. They are taking care nicely there. But, they are not with parents. It's sad.
They're claiming her passport has been seized, that she's been placed under GPS monitoring, that she's been ordered to surrender electronic devices and maintain specific bail conditions. It sounds like the plot of a political thriller, except these videos are presenting it as breaking news happening right now. And they're not just making vague accusations, they're getting incredibly specific. They name a federal judge, Catherine Polk Fail, as the one who supposedly issued this warrant. They reference a 127-page court filing that allegedly contains devastating evidence. They talk about secret recordings made by Melania Trump's former chief of staff.
But when they come here alone or with coyotes or illegally, you need to do something. Right. And a lot of like moms and kids, they are taught how to do it. They go over and they say like, oh, we will be killed by gang member. We will be it's so dangerous. So they're allowed to stay here. Do you understand?
No, I do. And they're the ones that are the bad ones.
Yeah, and they are not, it's not true that they would, you know what I mean? Some of them, they're using that lines that, they're not professional, but they're taught by other people what to say to come over and to let them go to stay here, because they could easily stay in Mexico, but they don't want to stay in Mexico because Mexico doesn't take care of them the same as America does.
You also had a conversation with the First Lady about her role as First Lady and some of her duties, including Christmas at the White House. I want to play that.
Recordings that supposedly capture the former First Lady discussing financial schemes, backdated contracts, structured transactions, and multi-million-dollar consulting payments. But here's the thing. When you actually try to verify any of these claims, when you roll up your sleeves and start digging, everything falls apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. Let's start with the judge they're naming. Catherine Polk Fail is indeed a real federal judge, which makes this misinformation particularly dangerous. They're not inventing a judge out of thin air. They're using a real person's name, someone who actually sits on the bench, and attaching completely fabricated actions to her. So when people search for this judge, they find she exists, and that lends credibility to the story. But when you check the actual court dockets, when you search Pacer or Court Listener, when you look for any federal case involving Ivanka Trump as a criminal defendant, you find absolutely nothing. Not a single case. Not a single filing. No arrest warrant. No grand jury subpoena. No motion for a bench warrant. Just the name of a real judge attached to fictional judicial actions. That's how sophisticated this misinformation has become. It's not enough to just make claims. They're weaving in real elements, real names, real terminology to make the fiction more convincing. And let's talk about the Melania recordings claim, because this is where the story really gets creative. Secret audio recordings of a former First Lady discussing financial crimes? That would be the kind of bombshell that destroys careers, topples reputations, and dominates global headlines for weeks. If such recordings existed, they would be the most sought-after evidence in any investigation. Every major news organization on the planet would be fighting to get access to them. Court filings containing these recordings would be analyzed frame by frame, word by word, by legal experts and journalists around the world. So where are they? Where's this 127-page filing that supposedly contains these recordings? Where can we see them? Where's the mainstream coverage of this earth-shattering evidence? The answer, of course, is nowhere. Because the filing doesn't exist, the recordings don't exist. They were never created, never filed, never entered into any court record. The entire narrative is a complete fabrication from start to finish. But here's what makes it so effective. The people creating these videos understand the importance of specificity. They give you page numbers. They give you dollar amounts. They give you names and dates and procedural details. They create this illusion of having inside knowledge, of having seen documents that the public hasn't seen, of being connected to sources that regular journalists don't have access to. And let's be real about why this story is spreading like wildfire. Because Ivanka Trump has actually faced legal scrutiny. That's the kernel of truth that makes the whole fake narrative stick. She was subpoenaed by the New York Attorney General's office. She did testify in the civil fraud case against the Trump organization. She did face questions about financial statements, property valuations, and business practices. There were real legal proceedings with real subpoenas and real testimony. So when these viral videos claim that things have escalated to criminal charges and arrest warrants, it doesn't sound completely crazy to people who've been following the story. It sounds like a plausible next step. People think, well, she was already being investigated, so maybe it got worse. Maybe charges were filed and we just haven't heard about it yet. That's the dangerous power of misinformation built on a foundation of truth. It takes a real situation, something that actually happened, and then adds layers of fictional escalation until it becomes something completely different from reality. The passport seizure claim is another perfect example of how this works. These videos are claiming that U.S. Marshals physically took Ivanka's passport to prevent her from fleeing the country. They're describing bail conditions, travel restrictions, and all the procedural details you'd expect if someone was being treated as a flight risk in a federal criminal case. But when fact-checkers like Hindustan Times investigated these claims, they found absolutely zero evidence. No official statements, no court records, no credible sources. Just viral videos and social media posts repeating the same claims over and over until they started to sound true. That's how misinformation works. It doesn't need to be accurate. It just needs to be repeated enough times that people stop questioning it. And when you combine repetition with emotional investment, when you're telling people what they desperately want to hear, the story becomes almost impossible to kill. So now we have to ask ourselves the hard question. Why are so many people so eager to believe this? Why are they sharing these videos without checking, commenting with such conviction, treating fiction as fact? Part of it is the desire for accountability. There's a huge audience out there that believes Donald Trump and his family have escaped consequences for years. They've watched investigations drag on. They've seen legal cases settle. They've watched the political system fail to hold powerful people accountable. So when a video comes along promising that accountability is finally here, that justice is about to be served, that the bad guys are finally facing the music, it's incredibly tempting to believe it. It feels good. It scratches an emotional itch. It provides satisfaction that real news often doesn't deliver because real news is messy, slow, and often anticlimactic. But we need to talk about the bigger picture here because this Ivanka arrest warrant story isn't happening in isolation. It's part of what some people have started calling the indictment porn ecosystem. And yes, that term is intentionally provocative because that's exactly what this is. It's content designed to provide emotional gratification, not information. It's content designed to make you feel like justice is coming, even when there's no evidence that it is. This ecosystem has been growing for years, and it's become incredibly sophisticated in how it operates. Content creators have figured out exactly what their audience wants to hear, and they're delivering it in ever more dramatic packages. The algorithms reward this behavior because engagement drives revenue, and nothing drives engagement like breaking news that confirms people's deepest desires. Whether it's claims about hidden evidence, imminent arrests, sealed indictments, or secret grand jury proceedings, the formula is always the same. Take a real situation with some genuine legal uncertainty, add dramatic claims that can't be immediately verified, present it with professional production values, and watch the views roll in. What makes this particularly dangerous is how it mirrors the dynamics of QAnon misinformation that swept through right-wing circles in previous years. Same pattern, same psychological exploitation, same tendency to believe in hidden processes, secret investigations, and imminent justice that never quite materializes. The difference is the political orientation. Where QAnon fed right-wing believers with fantasies of Trump secretly battling a deep state cabal, this ecosystem feeds left-leaning audiences with fantasies of Trump and his family finally facing the consequences they've been avoiding. Same psychological mechanics, same disregard for verifiable facts, same willingness to believe in dramatic narratives that feel good emotionally, even when they fall apart under scrutiny. And that's the tragedy of it all. Because when you spread misinformation about your political opponents, even when you genuinely believe they deserve accountability, you're not actually helping. You're undermining the very principles that make accountability possible. You're feeding a culture where truth doesn't matter anymore, only narrative and tribal loyalty. And it's not like these videos are low-effort productions that any casual viewer would immediately recognize as fake. Far from it. Some of them are remarkably polished. Professional voiceover work, dramatic background music, animated graphics showing arrest warrants and court filings, transitions that look like something you'd see on a major cable news network. The creators understand that production quality is a signal of credibility to many viewers. If it looks professional, people think it must be legitimate. They don't realize that anyone can hire a voice actor, license some dramatic music, and create graphics that look official. Production values and journalistic accuracy have absolutely nothing to do with each other, but the average viewer isn't necessarily equipped to make that distinction. So they see a well-produced video with a compelling thumbnail, they get drawn in by the dramatic title, and before they know it, they're sharing the video with their friends, completely unaware that they're spreading fiction. This is where verification skills become absolutely essential. Everyone who consumes news online needs to know how to check claims for themselves. It's not that difficult, but it does require a willingness to be skeptical, especially about stories that confirm what you want to believe. When you see a claim about a major legal development, the first thing you should do is look for the case number. Every real federal case has a unique docket number. It's public record. You can search for it on Pacer, on Court Listener, or through various legal research tools. If someone is claiming a judge issued an arrest warrant, there should be a case number. There should be court filings. There should be a publicly accessible record of what happened. If none of that exists, the claim is almost certainly fake. The second thing you should do is check mainstream news coverage. If a federal judge actually issued an arrest warrant for the former president's daughter, every major news organization in the world would be covering it. Associated Press, Reuters, The New York Times, The Washington Post, CNN, Fox News, all of them would be pushing notifications about this story. The absence of mainstream coverage is a massive red flag. Third, look for official statements. Real legal actions generate official responses. The Department of Justice would have to confirm or deny involvement. The U.S. Marshals Service would issue statements about executing warrants. Defense attorneys would be filing motions and giving press conferences. If none of that is happening, if there's just silence from everyone who would be involved, the story is almost certainly fabricated. Fourth, be especially skeptical of claims that only exist on YouTube or social media. If the only sources for a story are viral videos and social media posts, if no credible news organization is reporting it, if no court records support it, if no official statements confirm it, then it probably didn't happen. This doesn't mean every claim on social media is false, but it means you need to be rigorous about verification before you accept anything as true. And finally, recognize your own confirmation bias. We all have it. We all want to believe things that confirm what we already think. When a story tells you what you want to hear, that's exactly when you need to be most skeptical. That's when you need to hold it to the highest standard of evidence. Now let's be clear about what the real legal situation with Ivanka Trump actually looks like. She has faced civil subpoenas. She was compelled to testify in the New York Attorney General's investigation of the Trump Organization. That investigation did result in a civil fraud judgment against Donald Trump and his company. She did have to answer questions about what she knew, what she was involved in, and what role she played in the business practices that led to the lawsuit. These are documented facts. They happened. They were covered by legitimate journalists. They generated court records and public filings. There were also congressional subpoenas related to January 6th investigations. Questions about what Ivanka knew about her father's activities, what conversations she was part of, whether she tried to convince Trump to call off the mob that attacked the Capitol. All of that is real. All of that is documented. But here's the crucial distinction. These were civil subpoenas and congressional inquiries, not criminal charges, not arrest warrants, not indictments. There is a massive difference between being compelled to testify in a civil investigation and being arrested on criminal charges. The viral videos are erasing that distinction entirely, jumping from civil scrutiny to criminal arrest with no intermediate steps and no evidence. Could Ivanka Trump face criminal charges eventually? Of course she could. If investigators find evidence that she knowingly participated in fraud, if there's proof she lied to investigators or destroyed documents, if there's evidence of financial crimes beyond what's already been addressed, criminal charges could theoretically follow. The New York Attorney General's civil case did establish that some misconduct occurred at the Trump Organization. Whether that rises to the level of criminal activity for Ivanka personally is a separate question that requires evidence and prosecution, but there are enormous procedural steps that would have to happen before anyone could be arrested. Before an arrest warrant, there would typically be an indictment from a grand jury. Before an indictment, there would be a lengthy criminal investigation with subpoenas, witness interviews, and evidence gathering. Before charges are filed, prosecutors would have to believe they have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And all of this would generate news coverage, legal filings, and public records. You cannot secretly indict and issue arrest warrants for a figure as prominent as Ivanka Trump. That's not how federal prosecutions work. The process is visible. It leaves a trail. And that trail doesn't exist here. So why is this fake story so dangerous? Let's count the ways. First, it undermines credibility. When you share fake stories about arrests and court proceedings, and those stories are inevitably debunked, you make it easier for Trump and his supporters to dismiss all negative coverage as fake news. They can point to the fake arrest warrant videos and say, "See, the media lies constantly. You can't trust any of it." This is exactly what Trump has been doing for years, calling legitimate news fake news and attacking journalists. Spreading fake stories gives that lie more power. Second, it makes real accountability harder. When the information environment is flooded with false claims, real evidence of wrongdoing has to compete with fiction for attention. Journalists spend more time debunking fake stories than covering real ones. The public becomes confused about what's actually happening. All of this makes it harder for legitimate investigations to produce meaningful consequences. Third, it polarizes people even further. Fake stories push people deeper into partisan bubbles where they only trust sources that tell them what they want to hear. When people lose trust in mainstream journalism and official information, they become vulnerable to even more misinformation. The cycle feeds itself, destroying the common factual foundation that democracy depends on. Fourth, it exploits people's emotional investment in accountability. There are genuinely good people out there who care about justice, who want to see powerful people held accountable for wrongdoing. These fake stories prey on that desire, manipulating people's emotions to generate engagement and revenue. It's a form of exploitation that leaves people feeling angry, frustrated, and ultimately disillusioned when the promised accountability never materializes. Fifth, it normalizes the idea that truth doesn't matter. If you can just invent stories and have them treated as news, if you can create dramatic narratives that people share without verification, then what's the point of facts? What's the point of journalism? What's the point of evidence? This is how societies lose their grip on reality. This is how authoritarian regimes gain power by creating alternative realities. This is how democracy dies, not with a bang, but with a shrug and a willingness to believe whatever feels good in the moment. And let's talk about platform responsibility while we're at it, because YouTube and other social media platforms are not innocent bystanders in all of this. They profit from misinformation. Every time someone watches one of these fake videos, YouTube makes money from advertising. The content creators make money. The platform takes its cut. So there's a financial incentive to be lenient about enforcement, to let questionable content slide as long as it's generating engagement, and the algorithms are designed to promote content that keeps people watching, that generates comments and shares, that creates emotional reactions. Fake stories are incredibly good at doing all of these things. Real news, accurate reporting, nuanced analysis, those things don't generate the same level of engagement. So the platforms have built systems that systematically reward misinformation while punishing accuracy. Until that changes, until there's regulatory intervention or major policy shifts, the misinformation ecosystem will continue to flourish. So what do we do about all of this? How do we fight back against sophisticated misinformation that's designed to exploit our emotional vulnerabilities? Step 1 is individual responsibility. We have to be willing to verify before we share. We have to be skeptical of dramatic claims, especially when they confirm what we want to believe. We have to learn how to check court records, find primary sources, and evaluate the credibility of information. Step 2 is demanding better from platforms. We have to push for stronger enforcement of misinformation policies, for algorithmic changes that don't reward engagement above accuracy, for transparency about how content is promoted and monetized. Step 3 is supporting real journalism. Real reporters do the hard work of verifying information, checking sources, and publishing accurate coverage. They need our support, our subscriptions, our attention. When we prioritize real journalism over viral speculation, we strengthen the information ecosystem for everyone. But the most important thing is recognizing that we can't fight misinformation with more misinformation. We can't defeat lies by spreading our own convenient fictions. We can't hold powerful people accountable by making up stories about them, no matter how much we want them to face consequences. The only way to actually achieve accountability is through truth. Real evidence, real investigations, real court proceedings, real journalism. Everything else is just noise that makes it harder to see what's actually happening. So yes, the Ivanka arrest warrant story is fake. The Melania recordings don't exist. The passport seizure never happened. But the desire for accountability that drives people to believe these stories is very real. The frustration with a political system that seems to let powerful people get away with anything is legitimate. The feeling that justice is slow, that consequences never seem to arrive, that's a real problem. We just can't solve that problem with fantasy. We have to solve it with reality. And that starts with demanding better information, holding ourselves to higher standards, and refusing to accept fiction just because it feels good. Truth, facts, and evidence are essential to real accountability, even when they're uncomfortable or slower than we'd like. Resisting manipulation by those who profit from anger and hope is the hard work of democracy and the only path to justice.